Ever heard the phrase, a flash in the pan? That came from the Flintlock Musket. Today, we'll meet a Continental soldier and explore the very weapon that fought for American independence. Along the way, you'll discover how military life left its mark on our language through the idioms we still use today. So grab your gunpowder and lead. We're stepping back to 1776.
So this is a flintlock musket, or a firelock, they might have called it. So it uses a flint and piece of steel to fire the weapon. I have my musket, lock, stock, and barrel. It's a complete piece. This intricate part right here is called the lock. It's made up of a few important parts. This is the cock, it's the jaws of steel holding the piece of flint. You see right there where my finger is. This is the hammer, or the frizzen. This is the piece that the flint is going to strike against to cause sparks. And then the pan right here is where I'm going to pour a little bit of powder. I'm hoping those sparks would ignite and create a flash that would travel through this little hole here called the vent to fire the weapon. So that whole area is called the lock. And then the wood part of the musket is called the stock. And then, of course, we have the long metal barrel. Back then, you couldn't just go to a store and purchase bullets or cartridges. They would have to be manufactured often like from the home front. John Adams, his children famously helped mold bullets for the soldiers. To mold bullets, you first have to find some sort of lead. I have a lead ingot here, but you might need to source the lead from somewhere else, like strip it from windowsills. There was a statue of King George in New York. They decided they didn't care about it anymore when the war broke out, and they melted that down. So wherever you found it, you get lead and you put it in a pot. This is a small version of a smelting pot. You might have large ones. Put that over a fire and melt that lead down. Lead is one of the heaviest metals. It's also one of the softer metals, so it actually doesn't need a very hot fire to do so, which is nice. You melt that down into a liquid, and then I have here a ladle. So I'd use to scoop that carefully into one of these scissor molds. So they had all kinds of bullet molds. This is a simple one, small enough for me to maybe put in my own pack, but they had some that could do multiple bullets at the same time. This simple one has a hole in the top. I would carefully ladle that lead in there and cool it off. Maybe I'd throw it in a pot of water and pry it open. There would be a bullet like this inside with a big tail sticking up called the sprue. That's from where I poured it. I'd need to cut that off with these shears on the back of the mold called the sprue cutters, and I cut that off. And that's why this bullet has a little flat spot right here where that sprue is cut off. Simple overview of how you make a round ball, and you can put that in your ball bag here to be made in a cartridge later. Cartridge is the package that you have at the ready to load into your weapon. So I'd have 30 or so of these cartridges in my cartridge box. If you ever heard the phrase, keep your powder dry, this cartridge box is all about keeping my powder dry. So a cartridge is made up of a bullet, powder, and then a casing of some sort. In this case, it's literally just paper. I would need to go and grab my cartridge former, just a dowel with a divot on it so I could put the ball on there. So I take this ball and I would wrap this paper around it. So I might, tear up an old newspaper or book. A lot of soldiers didn't know how to read anyway, so why do I even care? I would tie it off with some thread like this until I get something that looks like this. So I have my tube of paper, lead balls hiding in there, thread on both sides so it doesn't fall out. And then with this tube, I now need to add the powder element. So I have a small powder horn here, and I have a powder measure. It's also made of a horn. It's just drilled out to the right depth so I get the right amount of powder. Too much powder, I could blow up my weapon. Too little powder, the ball would just plink in the grass. The British will laugh at me, and I'll have to run away crying, I guess. Carefully measure the right amount of powder in there. Dump it in, and then you fold that down into something that looks like what I was just showing you, this package here with a nice little tail for me to easily grab it out of my box and bite with my teeth. So I'd have about 30 or so of those ready to go in here. Now, to use the cartridge, I would be standing in line of battle, hundreds of other men, possibly some of them getting hit, and my commanding officer would say, load. And so I'd have to take my musket up here, grab a cartridge from my cartridge box, and then I have to go to the lock, and the cock, I need to pull back one click to half cock. You ever heard the phrase, don't go off half cock? That's kind of where that comes from. And then the cartridge, I'm going to take the tail, and hopefully I have at least two teeth. touch together to bite the tail off, expose the powder, and I'm only going to pour a little bit of powder in this little U-shaped pan here, and flip the hammer or the frizzen down to keep it in place. And I bring the weapon down and pour the rest of the powder down the barrel. Then I would unwrap the lead ball and probably throw the paper away. You could ram it down there, but a lot of soldiers probably just threw it out because, like I said, the cartridge is really just a package. And you roll the ball down there, and then you ram everything home with the ramrod. And you give it a few good taps so that's packed down tight. If you have any air pockets in there, the pressure can build and blow up your weapon. Pack it down to height, and then hurry, withdraw the ramrod and return it, because if you don't have your ramrod for next time, my weapon's worthless. So that whole loading process I'd be expected to do in about 20 seconds, 3 times a minute. Some soldiers boasted they could do 4. And then I'd come to attention and wait for my officer to tell me what to do next. My officer would say something like, make ready. I'd bring the weapon up, bring the cock into the full cock position. That's the firing position. Say something like, take aim, and I'd level in the general direction of the enemy. And maybe I wouldn't even look down the barrel. If I didn't want my powder burnt on my face like I kind of have, I might turn my head away. And fire, pull the trigger, and you'd hopefully get a couple sparks. I would land in the pan, ignite the priming powder, create a flash that travels through the vent and fires the gun.
Huzzah!
These weapons weren't always reliable, which is why I have backup weapons, knife, tomahawk, bayonet. And the reasons for that could be your flint. This flint here might only be good for 20 or 30 shots before it's dull. The flint is really just really sharp rock that's scraping bits of the steel off to create the spark. So if it's not sharp enough, it's not going to work. If the flint gets dull, I either have to nap it, which is the art of shaping flint, to put a sharp edge on it again, or I might have to come to my flint wallet I have hiding down here and get a new flint and replace it. Your frizzen or hammer here could also, if it's used too many times, the lead could become soft to the point where it doesn't cause a spark either. Your vent hole could get clogged. So there's a little vent, it's kind of dirty down there because I was firing it, but that little hole down there could get clogged. If that gets clogged, I might have a flash, but it might not go in there and ignite the gun. That's what you call a flash in the pan. You're a flash in the pan, you're just all show and no action. That's why I have on my person, I have this pick and brush. So if I fire a couple rounds, I have to brush out my pan and then clear my vent with this little iron pick here. So to keep that clear. The other enemy to these weapons working is moisture. There's a couple things I could do to help against that. I have here on my table what you call a cow's knee. It's basically a leather sleeve. When my musket is in the loaded and half-cocked position, like so, I could take this sleeve and slide it over the lock, like that, and then bring this little guy around and hold it in place, like that. And that might help keep rain off of it. I would also need to keep water from going down the barrel and getting that powder wet, so I might have a tompion like this to stick in the top. That's wood, or they had a lot of them made out of cork as well. If it was a rainy day, I was out on guard duty, I might have something else like that. The cartridge box and my weapons are the first thing I put on when I'm gearing up. Then I put on my haversack, which has my mess kit. So this bag back here, but it's kind of hiding, but it has my cup hanging off of it. That's where I'd have my mess kit and my food. And then, of course, my canteen. And then the last thing I put on is my knapsack or blanket bag here on the back. That would have mostly my blanket and my extra clothing, if I even had that. And then maybe a couple of these items that I would probably be sharing with other men in my tent. As you see, most of my bags are already taken up by my blanket and extra clothing. An army, you work as a team, and usually you'd sleep in a tent with 5 other men, so 6 men total to a tent. You would be relying on the other men in your tent to provide you with some of the things you might not have in your own knapsack. For instance, this cooking pot here would be shared by a mess of 6 men. You might take turns carrying that. Someone else in your tent might have the housewife down here, this little pouch that would have all these buttons and scissors and stuff in it for mending your clothing. Someone else might have your shaving kit and your razor. Washington wanted his troops clean shaven, both for being more civilized and for keeping down the lice. Someone else might have their weapon cleaning kit. So Like my musket here gets really dirty. I've fired it a couple times. You already see there's black soot getting on there, and that's very corrosive. It can rust my musket really fast. So cleaning your musket was really important. And then you might have, after all that, room for a couple of personal items. You have a deck of cards, or I was reading about one soldier, his grandma insisted that he take his pocket Bible. So I have a pocket Bible down there. And you'd be working together to survive. They'd march long distances and then camp in an area for weeks or even months, especially if it's winter. They, like Valley Forge, they were there for several months with not fighting, mainly just looking for food, probably maintaining their weapon, making cartridges, that sort of thing. Life wasn't all the adventure that everybody signed up for. It was often very monotonous and just focused on trying to survive, trying to keep warm, trying to keep fed, and also keep entertained. There are some items that might be behind the army. The army often had some supply wagons or pack horses behind to carry maybe some of the bigger, heavier stuff. Like the smelting pot here, they had bigger versions that, you wouldn't be able to carry that on my pack. So that would probably be like an item in a wagon, or maybe the extra lead they were able to forge for molding bullets. I might have a bar or something on me, but most of the lead for the unit would hopefully be in a wagon. Most of my lead would be ready to go in my cartridge box with 30 or 40 rounds in there.